People often say we're shaped by small moments, those seemingly insignificant choices that, looking back, defined the entire course of our lives. For me, one of those casual phrases became strangely prophetic. Every day walking into the juvenile courthouse in Portland, I'd confidently tell my colleague, "I'll work with these kids until the day I die." Those words, spoken with such affection for the job I loved, would become a premonition I could never have imagined. I grew up dreaming of making a difference. I found my purpose working as a supervisor in the probation department at Multnomah County Juvenile Court. There was something deeply rewarding about seeing potential in teenagers whom society had already labeled and discarded. I remember one boy in particular, Miguel, who was only 15 when we met. Everyone saw him as a lost cause, but I saw something more, a spark that just needed direction. In the years that followed, I watched that spark turn into a flame. He graduated, went to college, and now helps other young people. It was for stories like his that I lived. My routine was simple but satisfying. I woke up early, drank strong coffee on my wooden porch, watching the morning dew while planning my day. Oregon's fresh air was like a tonic, clean, invigorating, full of possibilities. I never imagined that tranquil life was about to change dramatically. It was on a sunny Tuesday, June 12, 2006. The sky was such an intense blue it almost seemed unreal, as if it were a prelude to what was coming. The pain started subtly, a familiar twinge on my right side. Kidney stone? I immediately thought, recognizing the sensation from previous episodes. I tried to ignore it, to keep working. I had an important meeting with a teenager who was making real progress. I didn't want to disappoint him, but the pain had other plans. Unlike previous attacks, this one didn't subside. It grew, transformed into something more serious, more insistent. While driving to the hospital, I tried to stay calm. "It's just a stone," I repeated to myself like a mantra. "I've been through this before." I walked into the emergency room with a calmness that now seems almost surreal. "I have a kidney stone, right side," I informed the triage nurse almost casually. I knew the protocol. They'd take me to a room, administer morphine. The pain would diminish, and I'd be home in a few hours. That was the routine I expected. The universe, however, had other plans. The doctor's expression changed when he saw my test. "We have a problem," he said, with that contained seriousness that healthcare professionals master. "Besides the stone, you have a pretty serious kidney infection." I tried to process the information. An infection? This wasn't the script I had imagined. "We're going to keep you here tonight," he continued. "Tomorrow, we'll do a procedure to break up the stone." I nodded, accepting the temporary deed. One night in the hospital, no big deal. I called my sister, told her I'd be out for a day. "Don't worry," I insisted. "It's routine." That would be the last conversation we'd have before I crossed the boundary between worlds. The surgery itself seemed to have gone well. I woke up groggy but relieved by the decreased pain. The doctors seemed satisfied, the nurses optimistic. No one realized, how could they, that my body was waging a silent battle against an invisible enemy. The antibiotic, those chemical soldiers assigned to protect me, weren't containing the infection. It was during the early hours that everything changed. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart hammering as if trying to escape from my chest. I pressed the emergency button, my fingers trembling so much I could barely reach. The last thing I remember is the shrill alarm of the heart monitor and a team of nurses flooding into the room. Septicemia, widespread infection spreading like a wildfire. One by one, my organs began to fail. First the kidneys, then the liver. My blood pressure dropped drastically. My heart struggled to pump. I was dying, not slowly and gradually, but in free fall. The strange thing, the truly extraordinary thing, was what happened next. While my body was collapsing, an unexpected serenity enveloped me. The fear I should have felt was replaced by a peace so profound it seemed to come from somewhere else. "I'm going home," I thought, with a certainty I had never experienced before. It wasn't resignation. It was recognition, as if part of me had always known this moment would come and was ready for it. The doctors later told me I was clinically dead for an hour and 45 minutes. They worked tirelessly, trying to bring back a man who, by all medical parameters, had already departed. But for me, that period of almost 2 earthly hours was a journey through eternity itself. The first sensation was liberation, as if I'd been carrying an invisible weight my entire life, and suddenly, in one glorious instant, it simply disappeared. I felt my spirit, or consciousness, or whatever name you want to give to that essential part of us, detached from my physical body. There was no pain, only an indescribable lightness. I saw my body below, surrounded by doctors and nurses working frantically. I observed with a strange objectivity, like someone watching a movie scene. That body, which for 42 years had been me, now seemed just an empty vessel, important but not essential to who I really was. Then came the movement. I began moving upward, passing through the hospital ceiling as if it were just an illusion, passing through entire floors in seconds, briefly seeing other patients, other human dramas unfolding, until suddenly I was outdoors, rising through the blue morning sky of Oregon. The speed was incomprehensible, faster than anything we can experience on Earth. I remembered a Bible verse that had always intrigued me. To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. Now I understood the literal meaning of those words. In the time it takes to blink before the upper eyelid even touches the lower, I was already crossing the vastness of space, heading to somewhere beyond. I saw what many describe as the light at the end of the tunnel, but to me, it looked more like a window or portal. It wasn't just light. It was living, pulsating, almost conscious light. As I approached, I felt its attraction not as a physical force, but as a calling of the heart, like returning to a home you didn't know you had lost. Crossing that window of light, how can I describe it with earthly words? It's like trying to explain colors to someone who has only seen in black and white. The instant I crossed the threshold, every cell of my being was flooded with an understanding. Everything is well, not just well in the sense of it's going to be okay, but well in the deepest, most fundamental sense, a cosmic correction of everything that had ever been wrong. The peace I felt wasn't just the absence of conflict or worry. It was a positive, active peace, as if peace itself were a tangible substance that filled the air, the light, every particle of that place. There was nothing that could disturb, irritate, or cause disharmony. I was immersed in a perfection I didn't know existed or was possible, but the deepest feeling, the one that still moves me when I recall it, was the sense of belonging. I never knew how much I felt like a stranger on earth until I experienced what it truly means to fit in, like a puzzle piece that finally found its exact place. There were no adjustments to make, no explanations to give, no apologies to offer. I belonged there simply by being who I was. The most extraordinary thing, it wasn't just God or celestial beings welcoming. It was everything in that realm seemed conscious, alive in ways we don't have words to describe. The trees weren't just trees, they were vibrant presences that acknowledged my arrival. The flowers, the grass, even what we might call air, everything radiated an almost palpable joy at my presence. It's hard not to sound presumptuous describing this, but it wasn't about me being special or important. It was about the unlimited love of that place, where every soul is received as if it were the only one in the universe, as if all of heaven had been anxiously waiting for this moment, this reunion. As I absorbed these first impressions, a new understanding arose in my heart. More than anything, I longed to see Jesus. It wasn't an abstract or theological desire. It was visceral, like thirst or hunger, but much deeper. I realized in that instant that heaven isn't just a magnificent place to be. It is, above all, a person to be with. I began to move with intention, traversing landscapes of indescribable beauty. Before me stretched a forest, not dark or intimidating like some on earth, but radiant, each tree seeming to emit its own internal light. I knew with that certainty that transcends earthly knowledge that Jesus was beyond those trees. As I approached the forest, something miraculous happened. The trees began to part, creating a path before me. It wasn't as if they were being pushed by some invisible force. They moved voluntarily, almost joyfully. It was as if they were participating in a cosmic dance, and my arrival was the cue for their next move. As I walked through that corridor of resplendent trees, I could feel their silent communication. He's going to see the king. He's going to see the king. They weren't audible words, but impressions transmitted directly to my spirit. The anticipation grew with each step, until I finally emerged into a vast open clearing, and there he was. I can't adequately describe Jesus' appearance, not because his form was incomprehensible, but because his presence was so overwhelming that physical details seemed secondary. He was slightly to my left, standing before an uncountable multitude, angels and what I can only describe as redeemed people, human beings who had completed their earthly journey. My reaction was instantaneous and involuntary. I didn't think I should kneel. I simply fell to my knees, my gaze fixed on his feet. It wasn't fear that prostrated me, but a reverence and gratitude so intense that my being couldn't express them any other way. Looking at his feet, all I could say repeatedly was, "You did this for me. You did this for me." Each word carried the weight of a lifetime of understanding compressed into a single moment of absolute clarity. Everything, the cross, the suffering, the sacrifice, wasn't just abstract doctrine I had learned and believed. They were acts of personal love, directed at me, as if I were the only person he would have died for. Words seemed tragically inadequate, so I could only repeat, with tears that seemed to come from my very soul, thank you. It was as if each thank you was just the tip of an iceberg of gratitude that no human language could fully express. Slowly, almost timidly, I began to raise my gaze. His ankles, his leg, his hand. Each part I contemplated didn't just exist, but love. It's the only way to describe it. Every aspect of his being radiated a love so tangible I could almost feel it. Physical caress. The moment I finally looked into his eyes remains the turning point of my existence. What I saw in those eyes still makes me stop and cry when I think about it. He looked at me as if I had never sinned, as if I had never failed, doubted, questioned, or strayed. There wasn't even a trace of disapproval or remembrance of my failure. It was then that I viscerally understood what it means when Scripture says God casts our sins into the depths of the sea and remembers them no more. It's not that he chooses to ignore them or pretend they never happened. It's that through Christ's sacrifice, they literally no longer exist in the heavenly economy. They've been completely erased, as if they never occurred. During that encounter, I felt as if Jesus was downloading information directly into my spirit, not with words, but with pure understanding. Truths I had studied for decades suddenly made sense on a completely new level. Trinity, grace, purpose of creation, concepts that seemed complex on earth were now crystal clear, as obvious as breathing. I felt as if all of heaven had been created specifically for me, not because of any special importance of mine, but because that's how God's love is. So personal, so specific, so individualized that each person received there feels like the guest of honor. I imagine everyone feels the same, and that doesn't diminish the truth of the experience at all. After what could have been minutes or centuries, time doesn't exist in the same way there. Jesus looked at me and said simply, "No, it's not your time. Go back." His voice, like everything else about him, wasn't just sound. It was love, truth, and authority perfectly fused. There was no room for debate or discussion, but strangely, I didn't feel disappointed either. I moved away from his immediate presence, but instead of returning through the same path in the forest, I discovered I could simply pass over the tree, not flying as we imagine, with wings or effort, but simply wishing to be in a certain place and instantly appearing there. It was as if the laws of physics were merely gentle suggestion, and reality responded more to intention than to mechanics. When I reached what I perceived to be the boundary, the transition point back to the material world, I felt that my body wasn't yet prepared to receive my spirit back. An indescribable joy flooded me. "Yes," I exclaimed, turning to explore more of that glorious realm. This time, I went to the left of the forest and encountered landscapes that defied description. Mountains moved like ocean waves, not in a chaotic or disturbing way, but in a cosmic ballet of beauty and purpose. The colors weren't just more vibrant than earthly, they were deeper, more real, as if the colors we know are just pale shadows of the true one. In the distance, I saw what looked like cities of light, structures that seemed made of solidified joy and crystallized love. Not for a moment did I feel the impulse to question or analyze. Here, knowledge didn't come through study or logic, but through direct and immediate experience. After this exploration, I felt compelled to return to Jesus. I found him again, and once more prostrated myself in worship. This time, I noticed something I had missed before, an extraordinary light emanating from him. It wasn't like a spotlight pointing outward, but as if his very substance was pure light that poured out in waves. As I watched, fascinated, this light began to envelop me, not just touching my exterior, but penetrating every part of my being. Again, after this second encounter, he pronounced the same words, "No, it's not your time. Go back." And again I moved away, this time exploring the area to the right of the forest. There I found what I can only describe as the source of living waters, lakes, rivers, and seas of a deeper and more alive blue than any earthly ocean. The water, if I can call it that, seemed conscious, singing its own music of praise. Animals of all species played freely, some recognizable, others completely new to me. A lion rested peacefully beside a lamb, and the scene didn't seem strange or unnatural, but as if that's how it always should have been. I observed birds with plumage that seemed woven with threads of light, flying in formations that looked like choreographed dance. Aquatic creatures leaped from the waters in perfect arcs of pure joy. There was no predator or prey, only complete harmony. For the first time, I understood the true meaning of peace, not just absence of conflict, but presence of perfect harmony. On my third return to Jesus, something new happened. As I prostrated myself before him, my peripheral vision caught movement to the right. Turning my head slightly, I saw a group of people looking at me with radiant smiles. In front was my grandmother Elizabeth, who had passed away when I was only 12. She was glorious, there's no other word. No longer bent by the arthritis that afflicted her in her final years, no longer with the expression of pain I remembered. Her eyes shone with a joy that seemed to illuminate her entire being. Behind her were rows and rows of people, some faces I recognized, others I didn't, but all somehow connected to me by bonds of blood or spirit. It was then that I realized they had been there the whole time. During my 2 previous encounters with Jesus, they were present, watching, waiting. I had been so consumed by Christ's presence that I hadn't noticed them. Seeing my family gathered, all glowing with the same inner light, all smiling with the same perfect joy, was a revelation. On earth, our family gatherings always had some tension, some complicated dynamic, someone absent. Here, it was perfect communion, love without any shadow of resentment, jealousy, or conflict. Among them, I saw faces that surprised me, people who I, with my limited understanding and human judgments, was sure wouldn't qualify for heaven, people who didn't seem to live according to the standard I considered essential. Their presence was a powerful lesson in humility. God's criteria are not ours. His love and grace are broader, deeper, and more inclusive than our narrow hearts can conceive. As I contemplated this extraordinary scene, Jesus pronounced his words for the 3rd time, but this time with even greater intensity. No, it is not your time. Go back. It was a command, not a suggestion. I felt as if all creation around me stepped back, as if saying, he's not talking to us, he's talking to you. In that moment, I felt like the soldier I had been during my time in the Air Force. An order received, a mission given. Yes, sir, was my instinctive response. Although he didn't say it in these words, I clearly felt it being communicated. I need you there more than I need you here, right now. Before I departed, my grandmother Elizabeth stepped forward. Her eyes met mine, and she said with a voice that carried the authority of eternity, bring as many of us back with you as you can. She wasn't speaking of the dead, but of the living, our family on earth, those who hadn't yet made their journey to the eternal home. I bowed once more before Jesus, with a heart full of gratitude and renewed purpose. I passed over those luminous trees for the last time, reaching the threshold, that invisible boundary between the realms. This time, I knew it was the moment. I took a step, and I was out, returning at the speed of light to the world I had left. The return journey was like watching a movie in ultra-fast rewind. Space, sky, the hospital roof, the floors, until I hovered over my own body in the ICU room. The scene below was somber. The medical team had given up. Instruments were being turned off, belongings organized. The doctor was literally signing the death certificate. My return was accompanied by deep sadness. I cried like a child torn from the protective embrace of its mother, not out of fear of what was to come in earthly life, but for the longing of what I was leaving behind. I entered again that cold, damaged, limited body, so different from the freedom I had just experienced. The heart monitor, silent for almost 2 hours, suddenly beeped. A weak line appeared on the screen. The medical team froze, incredulous, before bursting into frantic action. He's back, someone shouted. It's impossible, murmured another. For them, it was an inexplicable medical miracle. For me, it was simply the fulfillment of a divine order. The days and weeks that followed were an excruciating physical struggle. My body had suffered significant damage during those almost 2 hours without oxygen. The doctors prepared my family for the possibility of permanent brain damage. Medical expectations were low, but something extraordinary had happened to me beyond the boundary of death. That information, downloaded directly into my spirit, seemed to have altered something fundamental in my understanding, my perception, the very way my being processed reality. Recovery was arduous but steady. Each small progress was a victory. The first finger I managed to move, the first moment of recognition in my sister's eyes, the first word I managed to pronounce, "thank you." When I finally was discharged from the hospital, almost a month later, I was a transformed person, not just physically, though the scars and new fragility were evident, but at a much deeper level. The first and most profound change was the complete absence of fear of death. How could I fear something that I now knew was just a door to a more glorious home? This doesn't mean I'm in a hurry to die. Quite the contrary. I now see each day on earth as a precious gift, an opportunity to fulfill the purpose for which I was sent back. I began to see each person in a radically different way. The exhausted cashier at the supermarket, the aggressive driver in traffic, the rebellious teenager in court, each of them is loved by God with that same unimaginable love I felt in Jesus' eye. Each was created for that same glory I glimpsed. How can I look at them with anything less than reverence? My family relationships were completely transformed. The small irritate, old resent, the dysfunctional dynamics that seemed so important, all lost their power. I remember my grandmother's radiant smile, the perfect harmony of that heavenly gathering, and I wonder, why do we wait until heaven to love like that? Her word, "Bring as many of us back with you as you can," became the central mission of my life, not in a proselytizing or aggressive way, but with the gentleness and patience of someone who has glimpsed, however briefly, the end of the story. When you know how it ends, the middle chapters take on a completely new meaning. Another profound change was my relationship with nature. After seeing trees that move with conscious purpose and waters that sing praises, I could never look at a forest or an ocean the same way again. There is a life, a consciousness in creation that our dulled senses rarely perceive. Now, when I see the sun rising behind the mountains of Oregon, I can almost hear the same silent song I experienced beyond the veil. My work with young people also gained a deeper dimension. I continue as a supervisor in the juvenile court. I fulfilled my promise to work there until I die, though not in the way I had imagined. But now I see each troubled teenager not just as someone who needs guidance, but as a bearer of the divine image with an eternal destiny. When a young person looks at me with defiance or despair, I see beyond the facade to the infinite potential within. I'm often asked, "Did you change your religious beliefs after this experience?" The answer is complex. I didn't change religions. I'm still a Christian, but my faith is no longer a matter of dogma, doctrine, or denomination. It's the living certainty of someone who has seen, touched, experienced a reality beyond this one. I realize that many of our theological discussions are like blind people debating the exact shades of the rainbow. Important, yes, but so limited compared to direct experience. The most important thing isn't which church you attend or which rituals you observe, but whether you know, really know, the love I saw in Jesus' eye. This truth was reinforced when I saw people in heaven I didn't expect to see. People who, according to my previous theology, shouldn't be there. Their presence taught me the greatest possible humility. God's criteria are acceptance and surrender to Christ's love, not perfect compliance with rules or human standards. Who am I to judge someone's heart? Some of the most frequent questions I get are about heaven itself. What's it like? I always answer that it's both familiar and completely beyond our imagination. There are elements we recognize, trees, water, mountains, people, but all transfigured, elevated to their most perfect and glorious. The colors there aren't just more vibrant. There are colors that simply don't exist on earth, for which we have no name. The music isn't just pleasant sound. It's the audible expression of divine love itself, penetrating every atom of your being, and the feeling of home, of absolute belonging, is something no place on earth could ever replicate. Many ask about their loved one. Will we recognize our family? Will we remember this life? Based on my experience, the answer is an emphatic yeah. I saw my grandmother Elizabeth and recognized her instantly, though she had died when I was still young. Our relationships aren't dissolved in heaven. They're perfected, purified of any pain or dysfunction. Others want to know about Jesus. What is he like? It's the hardest question to answer. How do you describe someone who is simultaneously completely human and completely beyond our comprehension? His eyes contain universes of love. His voice carries the authority that formed galaxies, but speaks with the tenderness of an intimate friend. His presence is so overwhelming that falling to your knees isn't a choice. It's the only possible response. The deepest lesson I brought back with me, however, is about time. On earth, we live limited by this constant river that flows in only one direction. In heaven, I experienced what I can only call the eternal present, where past, present, and future coexist in perfect harmony. This perspective completely transformed how I live my days. I no longer despair over problems that once seemed overwhelming, not because they aren't real or important, but because I now see them in the context of eternity. That stressful project at work, that difficult conflict, that financial worry. In the infinite panorama, they are fleeting moments, opportunities for growth, not final definers of our existence. At the same time, small moments gained deeper meaning. A spectacular sunset isn't just a beautiful natural phenomenon. It's a reminder, an echo of that glory that awaits. A child's laughter, a friend's embrace, even a shared meal. These are preludes, samples of the perfect communion I briefly experienced and for which we were all created. When people ask why I was sent back, I usually respond with my grandmother's words, to bring back as many of us as possible. Not as a religious slogan or conversion tool, but as an expression of a love that wants everyone to experience the fullness for which we were created. If you glimpsed what I saw, you too would want everyone you love to get there. Sometimes, when I'm alone, looking at the night sky or walking in a silent forest, I feel an echo of that feeling of total belonging. For a fleeting moment, I can almost hear the trees whispering again, "He's going to see the King." And I know with every fiber of my being that one day I'll go home again, and at that time, I'll stay. Until that day comes, I live each moment with renewed purpose. Every interaction, every relationship, every choice is shaped by the knowledge of what I saw beyond the veil. I no longer live just for this temporary world, but as a citizen of two kingdoms, with responsibilities here, but my heart firmly anchored there. If there's one message I wish everyone would understand from my experience, it's this: you are loved. Not in a generic or theoretical way, but specifically, personally, intensely. The same gaze I saw in Jesus' eyes, the one that saw me as if I had never sinned, is directed at you too. You were created for glory, for belonging, for a joy that this world only hints at in its brightest moment. And when my heart occasionally longs for that glorious realm, I remind myself of the words that now define my existence. It's not your time. Go back. There is work to be done, love to be shared, people to be brought home. One day, perhaps soon, perhaps after many years, I'll hear different words. Well done, good and faithful servant. Now it's your time. Come home. And that time I'll stay.